They say most family drama happens around dinner tables, not on battlefields. I used to think that was just something people said on podcasts. Now I know better. We were at my parents' house in Langford, Virginia. Quiet little town, big on flags, church, and football. The whole Carson family had gathered. Mom, Dad, Miranda, and me. The same table we'd sat around since we were kids. The only difference was that we had a row of medals, and the other had the kind of silence you could hang a coat on. Dad was carving roast beef like he was performing surgery. Miranda sat across from me, glowing in the way she always did. Not from makeup, just from being adored. She had just returned from her tour in Belgium and gave a speech about modern warfare and gender representation that went viral in defense circles. Mom printed out the article and framed it. I'm not kidding. So, Dad said, cutting into his plate. The Pentagon's recognizing Miranda's unit next month. Ceremonies at the Fort Grissom Hall. Big deal. He didn't look at me when he said it, just kept cutting. Mom smiled like the turkey had stood up and saluted. They're calling it a formal commendation for leadership under pressure. Miranda shrugged, fake modesty locked and loaded. It's just a title. The real honor is serving. No one laughed. That's not how things worked in our house. I cleared my throat. Didn't know Fort Grissom was hosting internal commendations again. Thought they were still under renovation. Silence. Then Dad finally looked at me. You back from deployment? I nodded. 3 days ago, he took a sip of iced tea. Anything happen? I stabbed a piece of potato. A minor skirmish outside Moraine. 2 of ours wounded. Intel extraction was successful. Still no reaction. Miranda finally broke the silence. Moraine? Wasn't that where Intel got messy with the terrain shift? I heard Central Command had to move satellite passes because of cloud density. Her tone was casual, but I knew better. That was her speciality, sounding innocent while twisting the knife. Yeah, I said. They moved the pass. Didn't help much. Dad wiped his mouth with a cloth napkin. That's the kind of decision-making you gotta be ahead of, Sarah. I looked at him. It wasn't my call. He nodded once, slowly. Still happened under your watch. My mother suddenly stood and started clearing dishes no one had finished. That was her version of an emotional outburst. No one asked me if I was okay. No one asked who the 2 wounded soldiers were. No one asked how I'd made it back with a busted ankle and 6 hours of radio blackout. After dinner, we sat in the living room. Dad turned on the TV but muted it. Some military tribute program was on. Miranda's face appeared in a montage, talking about mentorship in the modern Corps. I said nothing. That part wasn't new. The only photo of me in the house was still the same one from basic, tucked behind a lamp in the guest room. Not that anyone had bothered to dust it. Miranda leaned back and said, They're considering my promotion to brigadier. Nothing's official, but General Holloway dropped some pretty heavy hints. Dad sat up straighter. Wouldn't surprise me, he said. You've been sharp. Always have been. I stood up. I should go. Early debrief tomorrow. No one stopped me. No one walked me to the door. That's just how the Carson family did closure, like an injury that didn't need treating. If you've ever sat through a family dinner where you felt invisible, drop a comment. And if you're still here, hit subscribe. We're just getting started. I heard Miranda's laugh through the window as I walked to my car. It was the same laugh she used when we were kids, and she convinced me to climb the roof to prove I could be brave too. I broke my wrist. She got a merit badge for creative team leadership. I drove home with the windows down. Bangford smelled like damp leaves and clipped lawns. Streetlights blinked yellow in that slow, small-town rhythm. It was the kind of night that wanted to be peaceful, but underneath it all, something was itching, like a sound just beyond hearing, waiting to break through. I kept the uniform on when I got home, not out of pride, just habit. I sat on the edge of my bed, boots still laced, staring at the ceiling like it might blink first. My childhood room hadn't changed, still had that dumb motivational poster on the wall, still smelled like mothballs and carpet cleaner. The only new thing was the silence, and even that felt rehearsed. The last photo of Miranda and me together sat on the bookshelf. She was in full dress blues, smiling like a senator's daughter. I was 3 steps behind, half shadowed by the flagpole. I remember the day like a toothache. She got her commission. I got told I should smile more. People like to say Miranda and I took different paths. That's only true if you ignore the part where I followed her into the army, joined the same branch, qualified in half the time, and still got called her little sister by people I outranked. She was always the headline. I was the citation nobody finished reading. I used to think it was a style thing. She wore polish like a second skin. Perfect posture, perfect words, always camera ready. She knew how to lead in rooms full of generals and journalists. I knew how to keep a recon team alive through a dust storm and bad intel. I had this weird phase once where I tried to emulate her. I took public speaking workshops and forced small talk at officer mixers. I stopped after a base commander told me I was too blunt for diplomacy and too calculated to be charming. That same week, Miranda was promoted to operations liaison for the Pacific Fleet. Coincidence? Sure. She made the military's 40 under 40 list one year. The article called her the prototype of the modern female officer. Dad laminated it. When I passed the selection for special terrain ops, he didn't mention it. Said something about how field work's a young woman's game. At some point, I stopped bringing up deployments. What was the point? Dad would just say, "Your sister's planning strategy for 4 theaters of operation." That outweighed getting ambushed at the back edge of a border nobody would admit existed. You know what else nobody brings up? When Miranda got caught in that budget scandal with the logistics division. That disappeared faster than a bad weather report. She left the inquiry room, looked straight at the press, and said, "No comment." The following week, she was photographed shaking hands with a senator in Montana. I asked her once during a leave overlap how she kept her record spotless. She smiled and said, "You can't spill blood if you never get your boots dirty." I thought she was kidding. Looking back, I don't think she was. There's a difference between surviving the system and gaming it. She knew where to stand, who to thank, and when to vanish. I knew how to climb through mud, read enemy signals, and make decisions that stuck. But one of those gets you medals and magazine covers. The other gets you silence and side glances. Mom always said Miranda had presence. That's code for you could put her on a poster. Dad said she was born to command. When he said that, he was looking right at her. I was there too, but it was not part of the sentence. The funny part? I didn't resent her, not the way people think. I just kept track. Every missed thank you, every overlooked mission brief, every conversation that pivoted back to her before I'd finished my sentence. I kept them like bookmarks, not out of bitterness, so I wouldn't forget where I stopped mattering. That's the thing about being the shadow in someone else's spotlight. You can still see everything. You just have to squint. The morning after dinner, I left without saying goodbye. No one stopped me. Didn't even hear a door open. Just the click of my car locking and the sound of my breathing. I had a mission report to file and an empty inbox waiting at the base. No one had called. Not even my CO Moraine had gone quiet. That's usually how you know something went wrong, when the silence shows up too fast. Like they're moving on before your boots are dry. I opened the mission logs in my inbox like I was defusing something. The Moraine debrief had arrived at 2:14 a.m. No subject line, no context, just a raw data dump. The first attachment was a terrain schematic, 3 days old and outdated before we even deployed. The second was a time-stamped itinerary showing the original op window. I scrolled to the bottom, in red. Revised insertion, 22:30 Zulu. That wasn't my handwriting. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the ceiling. It creaked like it was judging me. Outside, the air smelled like pine and diesel fuel. Inside, it smelled like blame. I remember the day we got the Moraine orders. Our team was running a live fire simulation off base. I was pulled mid-exercise and handed a sealed envelope by a courier who didn't make eye contact. Inside, one line, Report to Command Briefing Room B, 0600. Classified. No context, no signature. The room smelled like paper and nerves. General Wes Holloway stood by the whiteboard, arms folded like waiting for someone to fail him. Miranda was already in the front row, legs crossed, sipping black coffee like she owned the carpet. I sat in the back, where people didn't expect me to talk. Holloway started with buzzwords: surgical presence, minimal engagement, and strategic capture. It's an intel grab, in and out. The kind of thing you don't get medals for, just bruises. The target was an insurgent relay hub deep in the Moraine Desert. No heavy weaponry, no confirmed hostiles. Just sketchy chatter and a few heat signatures on satellite. "This is recon-led," Holloway said. "Lieutenant Carson's team will guide the insertion. Column Carson will oversee coordination." He didn't even flinch saying that. Didn't even notice the double Carsons. I did. So did Miranda. She turned and gave me a nod, congratulating me for showing up. After the briefing, I caught up with her in the hallway. "You know this terrain?" I asked. "I've read the reports." "Reading and walking aren't the same," she grinned. "You always get twitchy before ops." I didn't answer. She tapped my shoulder. "Just keep it tight. We'll be fine." Back in the war room, the first thing I did was request updated satellite imaging. The recon pass we needed was set for 0145. That gave us a window with eyes overhead, live data, clean movement, safe fallback. 2 hours later, Miranda walked in while I sketched out fallback zones. "You still planning for a 200 start?" "That's the only window with satellite cover," she shrugged. "We move earlier, we catch them asleep. Less chance for escape, less mess. We move earlier, we move blind." She stepped closer. "Command's leaning toward a 22:30 start. Holloway says we've got enough imagery to justify it." I stared at her. "He say that, or you did?" She raised an eyebrow. "You always get this defensive when your sister disagrees with you." "This isn't a sibling argument. It's an op." "Exactly, so trust the bigger picture." She left before I could reply. When I brought it up with Holloway, he waved it off. "Colonel Carson's assessment is solid. You'll adjust. Adjust." That word always comes before something breaks. I spent the rest of the day rewriting routes, recalculating timing, and preparing my team for a blind entry into rough terrain with limited visibility and no aerial coverage. No one complained. My team never did. Not even when we got crap missions, they trusted me to think ahead, to anticipate the thing no one wanted to say out loud. We rolled out from Forward Post Ashwood at 2100 hours. The convoy was tight, gear quiet, and comms checked twice. When we reached the insertion point of Foxtrot, the moon was a thumbnail in a dirty sky. The wind kicked sand in low spirals. It was the kind of night that smelled like bad choices. At 22:30, I gave the go. My voice was steady, even though everything in me said, "Don't." We moved in formation, 3 teams, 12 units, minimal sound. I led the point, scanning with infrared, counting my breath over my heartbeat. At 22:38, we passed a ridge near grid D-17. No movement, no heat. At 22:39, Corporal Julia Reyes whispered, "Ma'am, shadow at 10 o'clock. I paused. Scoped. Nothing on thermal. 2239.35. The first explosion hit. Not a boom, just a rip, a tear, like the ground opening its mouth. Reyes was thrown 10 feet. I crawled to her, helmet cracked, vest burned. Her lips moved but made no sound. I grabbed gauze, a pressure pad, and an adrenaline injector. None of it mattered. She was gone before I could scream. Then the comms went dead. One blast took out the relay antenna. We were ghosts now, cut from every chain of command. One of the medics caught shrapnel through the calf. Another guy, Private Lennox, kept shouting coordinates that didn't exist. He was bleeding too much to know where we were. I radioed backup, but nothing. Radioed again a different channel, but it was still dead. Extraction wasn't scheduled until 0500. Our fallback point was compromised. Everything we planned for 01450 had become irrelevant. The ground didn't care. I remember dragging Reyes's body into a ditch and covering her with my jacket. I didn't cry. Not then. At 0300, a patrol unit intercepted us by chance. Wrong place, right time. They radioed evac. A chopper came in low and fast, took fire from the south ridge, but made it out. We left with 2 dead and 4 wounded. The desert kept the rest. Blood, burnt packs, fragments of radios that never worked when they needed to. Back at base, I didn't shower. I sat in the dark with dirt in my mouth, and no one left to debrief, only ghosts. I reported for debriefing like I still believed someone might listen. The room was cold and loud in that silent way. Metal chairs, concrete walls, fluorescent lights that never blink. 3 officers were at the table, none from my command. A recorder sat in the center like the only one in the room with tenure. They didn't ask if I needed time. Just open the folder. Lieutenant Carson, confirm your name and designation for the record. Sarah Carson, Unit 5X, Tactical Reconnaissance, Field Rank, Lieutenant Colonel. A pause. One of them, a guy with a face like spoiled milk, looked up. You were demoted to lieutenant before this operation, correct? Number, that's incorrect. He made a mark. I watched him write the lie like it was routine. They walked me through every move, time of departure, entry point, when we lost comms, casualty count. My voice stayed steady. I didn't blink. I didn't look for sympathy. That's not how this works. Then came the real question. Who authorized the early shift in operational window? I was advised the original timing was compromised. Advised by whom? I hesitated. Not long, just long enough for all of them to register it. Colonel Miranda Carson. Was she acting as your direct superior on this mission? No. Was she authorized to override your deployment window? No. Another pause. This one lasted a little longer, like they wanted to make sure the blade hit right. Why did you comply with an unauthorized adjustment from a non-field officer? Because she was my sister. Because she always got what she wanted. Because I thought, for once, I might be part of the inside circle instead of cleaning up after it. I made a judgment call based on presumed intelligence priority, I said. Did you verify that presumption? I didn't answer. The man at the center flipped to the final page. We have a statement from Colonel Carson. She confirms strategic discussions occurred, but denies making any specific operational recommendation. That was her move. Always just enough rope to hang someone else. She was in the room, I said. She suggested the timeline. She said command would back it. Did she issue that in writing? No. Did you request it in writing? I didn't bother answering that one. We appreciate your cooperation. That was the end. No handshake, no eye contact. They ran the tape long enough to prove the silence wasn't technical. A week later, I was handed the letter, not by a person, by a mail clerk who dropped it in my lap like an Amazon package. Failure to adhere to operational protocol, resulting in loss of personnel. Effective immediately, suspension from field duty, pending further review. No charges, no formal demotion. Just a black mark that bled through everything else I'd ever done. I didn't call Miranda. She didn't call me. We both knew how this worked. If I stayed quiet, she'd stay clean. If I made noise, I'd make enemies I couldn't see. The next day, I packed my gear into a single duffel. I folded my name tag like a used napkin and dropped it in last. At the gate, my CO, Major Thorne, met me. He didn't say anything, just handed me my clearance code and nodded. Outside, I stood in the Arizona sun for a second, blinking like I'd forgotten how light worked. I drove home, not to my apartment, not to some safe house, home. The Carson house hadn't changed. The lawn was mowed too short. The flag was spotless. The welcome mat still had the military seal stitched like a joke. Dad was in the recliner, watching a rerun of some war documentary. He didn't mute it when I walked in, just looked at me once. You made a bad call, he said. I didn't make it alone. You were in charge. Mom hovered by the kitchen doorway, hands wringing, mouth tight. It's a stain, Sarah, Dad continued. The uniform doesn't forget. I went upstairs. My childhood room was still painted beige, as if no one had ever lived there. That night, I sat on the edge of the bed and waited. For anything. A knock, a whisper, a sign that someone believed I hadn't tried to screw up on purpose. Nothing came. Morning brought an envelope on the counter. My name is on the front. Mom's handwriting. Inside, a printed invitation. Miranda's promotion ceremony. Brigadier General Carson, Fort Grissom. No note, no warmth, just logistics. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I showered, ironed my dress uniform, and polished my pins until they gleamed like I still believed they meant something. The mirror didn't flinch when I saluted it. I stood in full dress uniform, hair pinned back to regulation, every ribbon aligned. It felt like playing a part in someone else's story, one where the hero looked like me but didn't bleed like I had. The ceremony was at Fort Grissom, 2 hours south. I left early, didn't want to get stuck in traffic or run into anyone. Mostly, I didn't want to give myself an excuse to turn around. The drive was flat, nothing but cracked highway, occasional signage, and the hum of a radio I never turned on. When I arrived, the parking lot was half full. Officers milled about in clusters, laughing, adjusting collars, rehearsing praise. I stayed in the car until my hands stopped shaking. I walked to the entrance, invitation in hand. The officer at the gate looked up from his list. Name? Lieutenant Sarah Carson. He scanned the clipboard, frowned, scanned again. Sorry, you're not on the list. I blinked. There's been a mistake. I have the invite right here. He didn't even glance at it. If you're not on the list, I can't let you in. Through the glass doors, I saw them. My parents, some cousins, even my old high school coach. Miranda stood center stage, laughing, adjusting her nameplate. I turned back to the officer. It's fine. I walked away before my face could catch up with my chest. My boots hit the pavement harder than I meant them to. I took off my cover in the parking lot and set it in the passenger seat. Then I just sat there, sweating under medals. No one remembered pinning on me. That was the last time I spoke to anyone in my family. No follow-up text. No apology. Not even a question. Just be silent, like it was a group decision. I blocked every contact with my last name, deleted every photo, cut the bloodline clean. No screaming, no scenes, just exit. I moved 3 states away, found a small apartment above a hardware store in Winslow, Nebraska. Population, don't ask. The guy downstairs sells paint and lies about his time in Vietnam. We got along fine. I didn't hang my uniform, didn't unpack the duffel. Just placed it in the closet like a body no one wanted to identify. Most days, I ran until my lungs burned. Most nights, I watched the identical 3 DVDs on a loop, old war movies that lay in cleaner ways than real life. No one came looking. I didn't go looking either. The Army called it extended leave, pending administrative review. Translation: don't come back unless we need a scapegoat or a body count. My record was technically intact, but I could feel it rotting. The kind of quiet punishment that doesn't stain your file, just your reputation. Once in a while, I'd get a call from a junior officer who remembered how I used to command. They'd ask about protocol, risk assessments, gut checks. I'd answer like I was still one of them. Then, I hung up before they asked how I was doing. I told myself I wasn't bitter. Just done. But every time I passed a mirror, I flinched. Every time I heard a helicopter overhead, I froze. Every time someone said hero, I felt like a fraud. Then one night, I found myself staring at the folded name tag inside my duffel. Same name, same person, just not the one they'd written out of the story. I didn't sleep that night. I opened my laptop instead. Logged into a secure terminal I still had clearance for, thanks to a glitch in the base's transition system. I typed one line into the search bar, Moraine Operation Satellite Logs, and waited. The search bar blinked like it knew I wasn't supposed to be there. 3 wrong passwords got me a system warning. The fourth, an old override code from my recon days, slipped through. Someone had forgotten to revoke it. Or maybe no one cared enough to check. The interface hadn't changed. Same blue-on-black layout. The same lag made you wonder if it was encrypted or poorly built. I reran the query. Moraine OP, satellite index /0145-0300 Zulu. For 30 seconds, nothing. Then a folder popped up. Classified. Level 5 clearance is required. I tried the override again. No rejection, no approval either. Just access. The folder opened like it had been waiting for me. Inside were 3 subfiles: terrain imaging, comms logs, and operation notes. The satellite feed came first. I clicked through the timestamps. 0145 passed. Then 200. Clear weather, good visibility, target markers glowing exactly where they were supposed to be. We would have had a perfect op if we'd waited, but the logs didn't end there. There was movement at 22:30, our actual deployment time. The satellite wasn't supposed to be overhead then, but it was. That was the moment I knew something was off. The satellite had made an unscheduled pass at 22:30. It saw us walking into the kill zone. This meant someone at command had changed the bird's route and never told us. Backed out to the index, opened comms logs. Messages between field coordination officers, pre-op. Most were routine, supply timing, weather updates, and status pings. But one stood out. Timestamp, 1 hour before launch. Sender, Colonel M. Carson, receiver. Tactical Logistics Officer Lance Tanner. Message, can't wait for her recon pass. Trust me, we go at 22:30. I'll take the heat if it goes south. I read it 3 times. Then again. She didn't just suggest it. She ordered the window shift directly to logistics. There is no loop, chain of command, or record on the official plan brief. It was an off-grid move, one she expected no one to question, and she let me sign off on it. I sat back, hands clenched so tight my knuckles cracked. The rage didn't come loud. It settled in my chest like ice. Backed out again. Opened operation notes. There it was. A typed memo from Miranda to Holloway, post-incident. Polished, sterile. No mention of the satellite deviation. No mention of her involvement. Just standard unforeseen terrain complications. And Lieutenant Carson made an admirable attempt to adapt under evolving conditions. It was a summary designed to kill quietly. I downloaded the 3 folders, encrypted them, and burned them onto a drive the size of a thumbnail. Stuck it behind the power outlet panel in my wall. If anyone came looking, they'd find groceries and tax receipts. Not this. I didn't go to the press. I didn't rant on social. This wasn't about scandal. I didn't want to go viral. I wanted the truth in writing under oath. I drafted a formal report and attached the files. Then I sent it straight to the Office of Military Ethics, District 8. No cover letter, just a title. Operation Moraine, unreported chain of command breach. And 1 line, truth matters even when it's inconvenient. I didn't expect a response. Not quickly. These things go dark. They sit in stacks or get buried under someone else's political scandal. But 2 weeks later, a call came through on a scrambled line. It was a voice I hadn't heard in years. Colonel Dana Ellery. She'd been my commanding officer back when I first entered recon. The kind of leader who didn't care about polish, just performance. I read the file, she said, and I just have one question. You still want to fight this the right way? Yes. Good. Then sit tight. And don't disappear again. She hung up. I stood in my kitchen with the cheap light flickering above me, holding a phone that suddenly felt heavier than my sidearm ever did. I didn't sit. I packed. Just the essentials: field journal, burner phone, encrypted USB, 2 changes of clothes, sidearm still registered under a valid carry permit. I didn't know where I'd be going next. Only that waiting in Winlow was no longer an option. It wasn't fear, it was instinct. When the system calls you back in, even politely, you don't wait to get handed a leash. The train station in Winlow didn't have scanners, just a dusty ticket booth and a vending machine that hadn't worked since 2018. I paid in cash and boarded west, kept my hat low and my name to myself. Somewhere past Kansas, I got a text from an unknown number. Reinstatement hearing set. Stand by. No name. No signature. But I knew the tone. It was Ellery. I got off in Redminster, Arizona. Half base town, half retirement desert. I used to joke it was where careers went to dry out. Now, I was one of them. Ellery met me in a diner just off Highway 2. No uniform, just boots and a stare that hadn't softened with time. You look worse, she said, then smiled, which means you're probably smarter now. I sat across from her, no handshake, no pleasantries. She slid a manila folder across the table. Unofficial summary, internal reviews reopened. They're looking at the Moraine file under new ethics protocol. Someone upstairs is nervous. I opened it. Half of it was redacted. The rest said what I already knew: someone had pulled strings, and I'd been left holding the rope. Ellery sipped her coffee. They want this quiet. They'll try to make it look like a clerical error, slap you with a revised footnote, maybe a retroactive commendation, but no one's going down for it. What about Miranda? Ellery paused. She's untouchable. On paper, high profile, fast-tracked, and politically insulated. You start swinging at her, you'd better be ready to knock out half the chain of command. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. She know you're back in. I shook my head. She thinks I'm still hiding. Ellery leaned in. Don't prove her right. I stayed in Bedminster under observation status. Not house arrest, but close. I wasn't allowed near any active operations or secure zones. I called it my limbo tour. Wake up, check emails that never came, and go for long runs in straight lines. I spent time auditing old field reports and correcting errors no one cared about. The kind of busy work they give to ghosts. The only call I got was from internal audit, requesting a voluntary statement. I gave them a tight, clean version, facts, no emotion, no speculation. They asked if I believed the timeline change was intentional sabotage. No, I said, but it was willful negligence. They didn't ask what I meant, just thanked me and hung up. A week later, I checked my file on the internal system. It had a new tag at the bottom. Operational integrity restored. Clearance level reinstated. No email, no ceremony. Just a line of text. The same night, I got another message. Pending assignment available. Review attached. Attached is a field brief. Classified location. Recon oversight. Needed an officer with discretion, history of adversity, and proven field leadership. At the bottom, report directly to Major General Don Ellery, Strategic Integrity Division. That was her way of saying, you're back, but not just where you left off. I closed the file and stared out the window. The desert was still red and empty. The kind of place that felt honest, even when people weren't. I didn't call my family, I didn't unblock them. But I did check the defense registry. Miranda's name was still trending. Multiple interviews, a podcast, and some op-eds where she talked about transformational leadership under crisis. All buzzwords, all clean. But one new entry caught my eye. A line at the bottom of her public commendation profile. Currently under secondary review due to discrepancies in pre-op protocol logs. No current disciplinary action. It wasn't justice, but it was a shadow. And shadows grow. I didn't smile, but I started packing again. Not like before, not reactionary. This was surgical. I kept what mattered. Burner IDs, field codes, raw data backups, and an encrypted tablet with every digital trace of Moraine archived in 6 ways. I left behind everything with a barcode. No note, no call, not even a courtesy email to Ellery. I figured she'd understand. People like us don't vanish because we're scared. We vanish because silence buys you the freedom to build. I ditched my government cell on a West freight train and used a secondary alias I hadn't touched since Fort Barron. The name on the ID was Lee Connors, born in Idaho with 0 military records. The photo looked like someone trying too hard not to look like me. I took back roads, switched motels every 3 nights, slept in boots, ate when I remembered. There was no master plan, just absence. Controlled, calculated absence. I spent 2 weeks working nights in Nevada at a shooting range that no one had inspected. Ash job, no questions. I fixed scopes and recalibrated rangefinders like it was therapy. Now and then, someone would ask where I learned to shoot. I'd shrug and say, Montana. The owner called me Sharps, and that was it. That's all I needed. One morning, a guy in a suit walked in. No name tag, visible sidearm, or casual interest in the gun wall. Just quiet eyes and polished shoes on cheap tile. He didn't ask for a rental, didn't sign the log, just waited until I stepped behind the counter. Then he said it. You're not hiding, Sarah. You're rehearsing. My stomach didn't drop. I'd already armored that part. Wrong girl, I said without looking up. He smiled just once. General Ellery says thank you. Then he left. No follow-up, no threat. Just a sentence meant to remind me that ghosts still leave footprints. I quit the range that night, burned the ID, switched vehicles. In Oregon, I camped out along the coast under another name, this time a trucker license from an old contact in San Diego. I lived in a modified van with a hidden satellite relay in the wall paneling. Every day I ran signal checks, not because I was scared, because I knew that eventually someone would want to find me, and I wanted it to be hard. I kept tabs on Miranda's name the way a hunter tracks motion, slow, distant, emotionless. She was still out there, still smiling for cameras. She was still writing opinion pieces on defense strategy, while the system quietly walked backwards through her timeline. The public didn't know yet, but the press did. Whispers started showing up on mill blogs. Nothing scandalous, just static. An anonymous source cited a pattern of command irregularities in one article under her name. Another said a close associate was under internal review for off-grid communications during classified operations. I didn't leak anything. I didn't have to. That's the beauty of bureaucracy. It never forgets. It just waits for someone to nudge the file from the wrong drawer. My only rule was simple. No contact. Not with Ellery, not with Base. Not even the officers who still believed I was worth something. I'd earned my silence. I planned to keep it. Until the envelope showed up. No stamp, no return address. Just slid under the door of my van one rainy morning. Inside, an official military commendation. Cold-pressed seal. Real ink. The kind of thing you only get when someone up the ladder wants to remind you that you're no longer disposable. It read, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Carson, status, reinstated. Full clearance, active duty, eligible. Attached was a single post-it note in handwriting I didn't recognize. You're back in. They just don't know it yet. I stared at the words for a long time, not because I doubted them, but because part of me had already started to forget what it felt like to be seen on purpose. I folded the letter like it was a weapon, not a welcome. Then I burned the post-it. I didn't need reminders scribbled in someone else's handwriting. I had my reasons for walking back into the fire, and this time, no one was going to write me out. I left Oregon without a destination, with coordinates. The military never says, come here. They send you grid points and expect you to arrive already knowing why. This one led to a small decommissioned airfield outside Southgate, New Mexico. No sign, no flag, just hangars that looked abandoned until you noticed the drone towers. I showed the clearance code to the guy at the gate. He barely glanced at it. Welcome back, ma'am. That was the first time anyone had called me ma'am in months. I hated how much it landed. Inside, it was all low talk and no insignias. Everyone moved like they were being watched by satellites, not superiors. It wasn't a base, but a proving ground for people who didn't want their names in print. They handed me a file labeled Operation Gray Shield. Inside, limited background, basic objectives, a field team roster, and a note that read, Strategic Oversight Role. Clean judgment required. At the bottom, stamped in red, no political contact, no familial ties. I laughed out loud. Someone in command had a sense of humor. I didn't ask who assigned me. I didn't care. Orders were clean. The scope was tight. It wasn't a setup. It was an offering. The mission was straight recon. Assess a compromised comms relay in disputed terrain, report findings, and coordinate extraction if needed. But the map told a deeper story. Gridline overlaps with Moraine airspace. A satellite pass is scheduled for 01450. A pattern starting to echo something they thought I'd forgotten. Except this time, I was in the war room, not in the dirt. I spent 72 hours with the maps, scrubbed the data blind, triple-checked fallback zones. When the junior analyst on shift got sloppy, I corrected him without raising my voice. "You're not here to teach," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm here to make sure no one dies because someone skimmed a footnote." The team respected me fast. Not out of fear, out of survival instinct. Soldiers know the difference between a leader and a mouthpiece. By the 5th day, we'd confirmed hostile interference with Allied infrastructure. A shadow signal is piggybacking on our uplinks, likely leaking intel. The trail led to a network node listed under a former contractor, Horizon Strategic Systems. That name hit like a live wire. Miranda had done a PR deal with them 2 years back. Civilian-military integration, tech-forward solutions, all smoke. And now they were on my map. I didn't say anything, just filed a secondary report. Quiet, off-channel, flagged to the ethics office again. The final brief was submitted without flair, clean wording, no implied blame. Just data that said, this area is bleeding. Command approved a full-scale review of Horizon's contracts the following week. No one connected the dots publicly, but someone upstairs did. I knew because a new folder showed up on my secure server. No name, no preamble, just one sentence inside. They're watching her now. I stared at it for a while. Not because I needed confirmation, because this time, I wasn't the one under the spotlight. After the op, they offered me a permanent role, strategic ethics liaison, base optional, high clearance, low exposure. It came with a house near Fort Larrabee, some ridiculous title, and a stipend that looked like hush money dressed in medals. I accepted, not because I wanted to settle, but because I knew it put me one floor above the people who once signed me off as an asterisk. I kept the job quiet, didn't update my record, didn't go public. My name started appearing again, just minor. Footnotes on secure documents, commendation chains, and internal briefings. Not loud, but present. It was enough to ensure they'd never lose track of me again. I signed documents now that used to get signed over me. Not big ones, internal reviews, ethics waivers, compliance notices. But every signature meant something. They were keys, and the more I signed, the more I saw what doors they'd kept locked. My office at Fort Larrabee was nothing special. No plaques, no flags. Just a locked cabinet, a secure line, and a coffee pot that hissed like it resented being useful. But the room came with access. Quiet, unannounced access to systems that didn't blink when I searched names like Miranda Carson. That's how I found the Horizon trail again. Buried in a logistics audit for a canceled tech pilot. Sub-vendor flagged for billing inconsistencies. Line item. Tactical Integration Testing Support. Arizona Theater. Dated 2 weeks before Moraine. No mention of Miranda by name. However, the project lead was a civilian advisor assigned to the 5th Expeditionary. Her old unit. Her old reach. Someone tried to delete the entry. Sloppy. Amateur-level erase job that only worked if no one was looking. But I was, so I dug. Late nights, no assistance, no one to cover tracks but myself. I used backdoor protocols I hadn't touched since recon days. Most people assume that ethics officers have just reviewed the policy. I treated it like fieldwork. Covert, patient, surgical. I mapped connections. Miranda to Holloway, Holloway to Horizon, Horizon to a contractor flagged in a separate incident, a data breach in Winslow, Nebraska. I nearly laughed. Same town I'd vanished into. It wasn't a coincidence. They'd been watching me long before I reappeared. I filed a quiet complaint, not as an accusation, but as a procedural irregularity. Then I flagged the network for internal review using someone else's clearance trail. The beauty of bureaucracy is that you can make it chase its tail once you get inside it. A week later, I received an unmarked envelope on my desk. Inside, 3 redacted memos, all internal to Horizon, dated during the Moraine planning phase. Each one was approved by someone who no longer worked for the company. 2 had retired early. 1 had gone missing last year during an audit. Patterns don't lie. People do. I didn't push the information to Ellery. I knew she was watching, but I needed one thing first: confirmation that what happened to me wasn't just ambition or error. It was a system built to protect the golden ones, even if it meant grinding the rest of us to dust. So I went to see someone who used to write the rules. His name was Colonel Trent Barlow. Retired now, running an overpriced defense consultancy out of DC. 10 years ago, he signed off on dozens of fast-track promotions, including Miranda's first bump from lieutenant to captain. Back then, people said he had a good eye for political talent. Translation: he knew who could wear medals without asking where they came from. I booked a fake consultation through his office under a corporate alias, walked in wearing civilian clothes and a poker face. He didn't recognize me. "Miss Connors," he said, extending a hand. "What can we do for your organization?" I pulled the burner phone from my jacket and slid it across the table. The screen lit up with one of the redacted memos. His face didn't move, but his hands did. A slight twitch in the left thumb. Microtells. Panic looks small when you're trained to sit still. "Where did you get this?" he asked. I didn't answer, just watched him reread it. He swallowed once. "I don't know what you think this proves," he said. Horizon had dozens of contractors. "Sure," I said. "And only one of them signed off on an op that killed 2 of my men." He opened his mouth again, closed it. I stood up. "Don't worry, Colonel. I'm not here to ruin careers. I'm just building a file." Then I left. Walked back into the cold with a face that didn't flinch. I wasn't hunting them. I was boxing them in. The wind outside was a bit hard, but my hands were steady. I didn't go home. I went 3 blocks down to the county archive, walked past the public records desk, and paid for a private booth. No ID, no name, just cash, and a quiet nod from the clerk, who'd seen too many people come in chasing ghosts. I wasn't chasing mine. I was organizing them. I had everything I needed: the redacted memos, the audit trails, the civilian contractor logs, and the piece that tied it all together: a short chain of emails between Horizon and a temporary ethics advisor who'd approved an off-timetable adjustment for Moraine. No military oversight. Just one line: approval granted under the Expedited Advisory Protocol. Attached, justification PDF. The file was gone, of course, but the approval still bore a timestamp. 1 hour before, Miranda pressed the command to shift the op window. It wasn't just circumstantial anymore. It was coordinated negligence, and the negligence had a name. I compiled the file cleanly. No commentary, no emotion. Just titles, links, certifications, and a short index with 6 references. I burned it to a classified encrypted drive and mailed a sealed duplicate to the Office of Military Ethics, District 8, from a remote post office in Flagstaff. No cover letter, no warning. Just a sticky note inside that said, "If this disappears, I won't." I didn't wait for confirmation. Instead, I went back to work. Ellery reached out a week later. No small talk. Just a short voice message on a secure line. "Good work, Carson. It's moving. Don't ask where." That was enough. My role expanded quietly. No promotions, no fanfare. But the files I reviewed started carrying bigger names. Internal operations, once considered untouchable, were now under discreet ethics review. I saw the fingerprints of men who used to sign my fate in blue ink. I didn't erase them. I just made sure someone else finally looked. The silence of it all was what healed me most. No spotlight, no medal. I knew my quiet step was a brick back under my name. I spent more time at the base in Bedminster, training new officers on procedural integrity, reviewing operational audits, and sitting in on round tables where generals used to pretend I didn't exist. They didn't ask about Moraine. They just nodded when I spoke now. The kind of nod that meant, "We see you," and that was enough. Walking out of a debrief one afternoon, I ran into Lance Tanner. He was a field tech back during the Moraine deployment. He'd lost part of his hearing in the blast. Last I heard, he was reassigned to communications support stateside. "Lieutenant Colonel Carson," he said, blinking. "I didn't know you were back." "I never really left," I said. He smiled. "Good, because a lot of us thought they buried the wrong name." I didn't answer. Just clapped him on the shoulder and moved on. Some truths don't need applause. Back in my quarters, I finally did something I hadn't done in a long time. I opened the uniform drawer, pulled out the regulation jacket, ran my hand over the fabric. The name still said Carson, threaded in tight, nothing fancy. But it wasn't the same jacket I'd worn into Moraine. This one had a different weight to it, not just because of the rank, because of what I'd carried to get here. I put it on, just to see if it still fits. The mirror didn't argue. I walked outside into the Arizona sun and stood there for a while. No mission, no order, just gravity. Me upright in the very place they once tried to fold me into silence. My comms tablet buzzed. Message. Departmental recognition upcoming. Shortlist candidates being finalized. Commendation ceremony scheduled. Command request, be present. I stared at it like it had come from another planet. Same format, same language. The same system that had once told me I didn't exist. But now, my name was back in its mouth. I didn't reply. I booked the flight instead. One way to get into DC is through military clearance and government rates. No fanfare, no luggage. Just a uniform bag, a flash drive, and a folder marked "Supporting Documents, Internal Use Only." The ceremony wasn't listed publicly, of course. It never was for this level. They called it a strategic commendation briefing, held inside a repurposed operations hall at Fort Crescent, where history never smiled, just archived. I arrived the night before, checked into a nameless government lodge with carpets older than most junior officers. I ironed my jacket myself. No aides, no assistants. I'd never wanted them. Still didn't. In the morning, I stood in front of the mirror again. The stars on my collar caught the light, and for once, I let them. Not because I needed to be seen, but because I knew what it cost to wear them. The room was packed when I arrived. Brass everywhere, sidearms glinting under perfect lighting, and enough protocol to choke a courtroom. I walked through the crowd like I belonged, because, this time, I did. Not because they said so, because I said so. I took my seat near the front, 2 rows behind the podium. People whispered. I heard my name once, twice. Some mouths said Carson, like it was a myth that had reappeared from the footnotes. Some said it like they were afraid I might hear. I did. But I didn't look. The ceremony itself was dry, as always. Speeches from faces built for television. The language that meant nothing unless you knew how to read between the lines. Phrases like service beyond reproach, strategic integrity, unseen resilience. I sat still, not out of discipline, out of knowing that none of them had ever been erased. When the host reached the last portion, the air changed. He cleared his throat. "There's one more name," he said, "whose file nearly disappeared, but whose actions rebuilt more than a record. She didn't ask for recognition. She never needed it. But she earned something better, undeniability. He paused. The room didn't. Everyone turned. General Sarah Carson. That pause was louder than applause. Then came the standing. Not all, but enough. Enough to make it echo. I stood slowly, no rush. Walked to the podium at a pace they couldn't misread. Controlled. Calm. Entirely mine. The general presenting the award didn't speak. Just pinned the medal over my heart and stepped back with a nod that felt more like an apology than congratulations. I took the mic, not because I had a speech, but because silence would have felt like surrender. I was never meant to be here, I said. Not because I wasn't qualified, but because systems don't make room for ghosts they buried too well. I scanned the room, stopping only when I saw two familiar silhouettes in the back, Miranda and Holloway, both rigid, both watching, neither smiling. I continued. There was a time I wore this uniform and still felt invisible. I followed orders, carried the weight, buried the names of men I lost. And when I asked why, when I questioned a failure that wasn't mine, I didn't get answers. I didn't raise my voice. I got erased. Silence again. No one coughed. No one moved. But records don't stay buried, and ghosts learn how to knock down walls. I stepped back from the mic. No dramatics, no salute. Just the sound of a room full of people realizing the quiet ones survived too. Later, in the lobby, they came. A few old names. A few new ones. Officers, I didn't think you remembered me. One young soldier stepped forward. Barely 20, uniform stiff with starch. You're the reason I didn't quit, she whispered. I didn't know her, but I nodded. Because I understood exactly what that cost. My boots echoed louder as I crossed the marble floor than the applause had been. I didn't stop to speak to anyone else. Not the junior officers lingering by the coffee urn. Not the colonel who used to forget my name in briefings. It was not the press liaisons who were just realizing they hadn't vetted the right person. I walked straight toward the back corridor where the screen was mounted. It was 15 feet wide, military-grade LED, set into the wall like it had been there longer than the building. Above it, in silver lettering, honorable recognition, active command. Names cycled every 10 seconds. Each line displayed as ranked, named, command division, and status. No colors, no flair, just data. Unarguable. I stood in front of it and waited. It cycled through battalion commanders, division chiefs, and strategic liaisons. I kept reading. I didn't blink. Then I saw it. General Sarah Carson, Strategic Ethics Liaison, District 8 active, commendation filed. I read it twice, not because I didn't believe it, because it was finally there. I didn't have to defend it. Behind me, I could hear footsteps, slower now, some hesitating, some stopping. I didn't turn around. A few more names passed, then hers. Major Miranda Carson, 5th Expeditionary. Status, pending review. Her name stayed up a second longer than it should have. Some glitches tell the truth better than any official statement. I looked at it, and I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I didn't feel anything sharp or sweet. Just finality. Clean. Cold. Correct. The footsteps behind me stopped. You didn't tell us, a voice said. I turned. My father. No rank on his jacket. No medals. Just a pressed civilian suit. Hands clasped like he didn't trust them to stay still. Beside him, my mother. Stiffer, paler, quieter than I remembered. Her eyes moved from the screen to me like she didn't know which was harder to face. You didn't ask, I said. He flinched. Not much, but enough to catch it. My mother spoke next. You could have called. I did, I said. Years ago, you listened to someone else. She nodded, not defensive, not apologetic, just tired. We didn't know how to believe you. I didn't need belief, I said. I needed backup. My father cleared his throat and looked at the screen again. Miranda's name had disappeared, replaced by a new incoming commander from Red River Base. You outrank her now, he said. That's not the point, I said. He didn't argue, just staring like the screen owed him something it wouldn't give. Miranda arrived a moment later. She walked slower than usual. Kind of slow that says, "I've already read the new memo." We locked eyes. She didn't speak first. That was new. "I didn't mean for it to go that way," she said. "That night, that operation, it spun." "It didn't spin," I said. "You pushed it." She nodded, swallowed. "I thought I could fix it before it broke." "You broke it on purpose," I said. "You just didn't think anyone would bleed." Her jaw tensed, but she didn't deny it. "I'm not here to fight," I said, "and I'm not here to forgive. I'm here because I earned it, whether you like it or not." "I never said you didn't," she said. "You never had to. You let the silence speak." No one answered that. Not my parents, not her. They stood there, a triangle of people who once shared blood but never truths. And I stood in the center like something foreign that refused to fold back in. I looked at them one more time, not in anger, in clarity. "You taught me family was loyalty," I said. "But you broke that before I ever did. You stood beside the one who had everything, and left the one who built herself from nothing." Still, no reply. And that was enough. I turned my back to them before they could look away first. My boots tapped the polished floor in a rhythm that didn't flinch. I walked past the scrolling screen, the podium, and the officers who still hadn't decided if they were impressed or threatened. I didn't care. Outside, the wind had died down. The sky stretched wide and blue like it owed me something, but I didn't ask. I stood on the edge of the stone steps and took in the weightless kind of silence that comes not from absence, but from arrival. Behind me, someone cleared their throat. I didn't turn. A man stepped forward, someone I didn't know. The civilian suit, clipboard under one arm, a badge that read, "Departmental Public Affairs." "They're asking if you'd like to say a few words again," he said. "For the press summary. We can keep it off record if you want." I didn't answer right away. I looked past the flagpole, the parking lot, and the rows of trimmed hedges, trying too hard to resemble order. I thought about all the times I'd been told to keep quiet, stay in line, and let the story be someone else's. "Fine," I said. "Just one mic. No cameras." He nodded and disappeared. Less than 2 minutes later, I was back on the steps, a small mic clipped to my collar. No crowd, just a few reporters in back rows, waiting with half-open notepads, and that empty stare people wear when they think they already know the ending. I looked out, not at them, past them, and spoke. There was a day I stood outside a ceremony and was told I wasn't on the list. Same uniform, same bars on my shoulder. But no one called my name. I let that hang. That day, I walked away not just from a building, but from people who decided I didn't belong in the story they were writing. Then stopped scratching in the back row. I didn't walk away from who I was. I walked toward it. I rebuilt myself without their headlines, without their permission. My voice didn't waver. This medal, I touched the one still pinned to my chest, isn't redemption. It's recognition. There's a difference. One says sorry. The other says, "We see you now." No one moved. "I don't need to be on their list anymore," I said. "Because now I build the table. And if I invite you, you better bring more than applause." There wasn't applause. Just stillness. And that was better. I stepped away, took off the mic, handed it back, walked down the steps, straight across the front plaza, without checking if anyone followed. A black sedan waited at the curb, unmarked, tinted windows rolled up. The driver didn't get out. He didn't have to. It wasn't an escort. It was just how generals left. I opened the back door and got in. The interior smelled like leather and cold air. I sat back and let the silence settle. Car pulled away. No music, no calls. Just asphalt beneath us, smooth and endless. Some people spend their lives chasing family for validation. Others spent decades proving they were worthy all along. Me? I stopped chasing. I stopped explaining. I stopped shrinking to fit their comfort. Because I was never too much. They were just never enough to hold what I was becoming. And now, I lead. Not because I need the world to remember my name, but because I finally remembered it myself. Sarah Carson, General, daughter of no one, leader of many. I used to think I needed them to say it. Call me brave, admit they were wrong, and see me finally. But looking back, it was never about being seen. It was about not disappearing. And I didn't. I stayed when they turned away. I stood up when they wrote me off. And I spoke when silence would have been safer. Now, when I look in the mirror, I don't see what they missed. I see what I built. And that's more than enough to keep walking. If this kind of story hits something real for you, stories about family, betrayal, finding your voice when no one wants to hear it, then stick around. We've got more true-feeling family revenge stories, more raw family stories that don't pull punches, and more moments where quiet people finally take the lead. Subscribe to the channel because the best family revenge stories aren't loud. They're honest.